I found a hidden room in my house. What was inside changed my life forever. This happened 2 years ago. Even now, writing this makes my hands shake. I've told pieces of this story to friends and family, but nobody knows the entire truth. Some people think I'm exaggerating. Others think I'm lying. Honestly, I wish I were. Because if what happened to me hadn't happened to me personally, I probably wouldn't believe it either. It started after I bought my first house. I was 29 years old at the time, single, no kids, decent job in software development. After years of saving money and living in tiny apartments, I finally had enough for a down payment. The housing market wasn't exactly friendly, so my options were limited. Most houses in my budget needed work, a lot of work. Then I found it, a 2-story house sitting at the end of a quiet country road. The property was surrounded by dense woods. The nearest neighbor was almost half a mile away. The place looked like something straight out of a movie. A wraparound porch, large windows, a stone chimney, and a price that seemed suspiciously low. I asked the realtor why. She told me the previous owner had died alone. No wife, no children, no known relatives. After his death, the property sat vacant for years. People apparently weren't interested in maintaining a house that far away from town. Lucky me, or so I thought. The inspection didn't reveal anything serious. The roof was old, but usable. The plumbing needed minor repairs, nothing alarming. Within a month, the house was mine. The first year was peaceful, almost boring. I worked remotely, spent weekends fixing things, and slowly turned the place into my dream home. I never experienced anything unusual. No strange noises, no creepy sightings, nothing. Then came the basement. The basement wasn't scary, just unfinished. Concrete floors, concrete walls, old shelves, boxes left behind by previous owners. I mostly ignored it. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I decided to clean it out. My goal was to convert it into a gaming room. I spent hours moving junk. Dust covered everything. By evening, I was exhausted. Only one thing remained. A massive wooden bookshelf bolted against the far wall. The thing looked ancient, at least 50 years old. It was completely empty, which was strange. Why would somebody bolt an empty bookshelf to a wall in a basement? I grabbed a wrench and removed the bolts. Then I pushed. The shelf moved a few inches. That's when I noticed something behind it. At first, I thought it was a crack in the wall. Then I realized it wasn't a crack. It was a gap, a perfectly straight gap. My stomach immediately tightened. I pushed the bookshelf farther aside, and there it was, a door, hidden behind the shelf. I froze. The door was small, narrow, made of old wood. No handle, no visible lock, nothing. Just a plain wooden door embedded into concrete. I remember staring at it for nearly a minute, trying to understand what I was looking at. Every house has weird construction decisions. Maybe it was storage. Maybe a utility closet. Maybe some forgotten renovation project. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The entire doorframe had been painted to match the concrete wall. Someone hadn't simply hidden the room. Someone had intentionally concealed it. I tried pushing the door. Nothing. I pulled. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. Finally, curiosity won. I grabbed a crowbar from my toolbox. The wood cracked almost immediately. The sound echoed through the basement. A loud cracking noise. Then, silence. For a second, I actually considered stopping. Calling somebody. Maybe even the police. Instead, I kept going. 5 minutes later, the door finally opened. A rush of cold air escaped from inside, along with a smell I'll never forget. Dust, mold, and something metallic, like old coins. The room beyond was completely dark. I grabbed my flashlight, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The hidden room was much larger than I expected. At least 15 feet wide, maybe 20 feet long. The walls were concrete. No windows, no furniture, no decorations, nothing. Except for one thing. A large metal trunk sitting directly in the center. That's it, just one trunk. The entire room seemed built around it. At first I laughed. It felt ridiculous, like I had stumbled into some treasure-hunting movie, a secret room, a mysterious chest. I half expected pirate gold. What I found was much worse. The trunk was locked, heavy too, extremely heavy. I dragged it upstairs, spent nearly 30 minutes breaking the rusted lock. Finally, it snapped. The lid opened. Inside were hundreds of photographs, thousands maybe. They weren't organized, just piled together. I picked up the first photo. It showed the front of my house. The second photo showed the backyard. The third showed the porch. The fourth showed the driveway. Every photograph was of my property. Some pictures looked decades old. Others appeared recent, very recent. I continued digging through the stack, my curiosity slowly turning into unease. Then I found a photograph of myself. I stopped breathing. It was me carrying groceries from my car. I recognized the clothes immediately. The photo had been taken less than a year earlier, long after I purchased the house, long after the previous owner died. I looked through more photos. There were dozens. Me mowing the lawn, me checking the mailbox, me walking my dog, me sitting on the porch using my laptop. Every picture had been taken without my knowledge, without my consent, without me ever noticing. My hands started shaking. Someone had been watching me. But who? And from where? Then I noticed something underneath the photos, a black notebook. The cover was worn. The pages were yellow. I opened it. At first, the entries seemed random. Dates, weather conditions, times, observations. Most of them described activities happening around the property. Birds returned to the oak tree today. Delivery truck arrived at 2:17 p.m. Subject left house at 8:43 a.m. Subject. I kept reading. Every entry became more disturbing. The notebook wasn't describing the house. It was describing me. Page after page, day after day. Someone had documented nearly every movement I'd made since moving in. And then I reached the final entry, the most recent one, written only 3 weeks earlier. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, almost rushed. It contained a single sentence. He still hasn't discovered the room? My blood turned cold. Because the previous owner had been dead for 3 years. Which meant somebody else had written it, and whoever wrote it knew exactly where I lived, knew exactly what I was doing, and had somehow been inside my house, recently, very recently. I immediately called the police. What happened next only made things worse. The police arrived about 30 minutes later. 2 officers, a younger guy who looked curious, and an older officer who looked like he'd seen everything, at least until he saw the photographs. I spread everything across my dining room table, the pictures, the notebook, the pages filled with observations about my daily life. The older officer stopped smiling. He slowly flipped through the notebook, then looked at me. You're saying the previous owner died 3 years ago? That's what the realtor told me. And these photographs were taken after you moved in? Yes. He exchanged a glance with his partner, the kind of glance that says, this is no longer routine. They searched the hidden room, collected the notebook, bagged dozens of photographs as evidence. Then they asked me a question that immediately made me nervous. Do you have somewhere else you can stay tonight? I asked why. The officer hesitated before answering. Because if someone has been entering your property without your knowledge, we don't know if they're still nearby. That was all I needed to hear. I packed a bag and drove to my friend Mark's apartment in town. I barely slept. Every creak in the building made me jump. Every notification on my phone made my heart race. The next morning, the police called. They wanted me to come to the station. Immediately, my stomach sank. I drove there expecting answers. Instead, I got more questions. The notebook had fingerprints. Only 2 sets. Mine and the previous owner's. Nothing else. No unknown fingerprints, no DNA, no hair, no fibers, nothing. It was as if the person who had been watching me had never physically touched anything. The detective assigned to the case looked frustrated. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. That sentence stayed with me. Because suddenly, I wasn't imagining some creepy neighbor taking pictures. I was imagining someone careful, someone experienced, someone patient. The police installed cameras around my property, motion sensors too. For the next few weeks, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. No movement, no suspicious activity, no visitors. Eventually, life started feeling normal again, at least on the surface. But every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. Every time I walked through the woods, I found myself checking over my shoulder. The feeling never left. Then came the first real break in the case. About a month later, Detective Harris called me. His voice sounded excited. Can you come down here? What happened? We found something. I arrived 20 minutes later. He showed me an old county map. The property map looked normal at first. Then he pointed to a faded line running beneath my land. Do you know what this is? I shook my head. It's an old service tunnel. I stared at him. A what? He explained that nearly 80 years ago, a mining company operated in the area. Several underground tunnels connected different parts of the property. Most had supposedly collapsed decades ago, supposedly. The detective tapped one section of the map. The tunnel appeared to pass directly underneath my house, and directly underneath the hidden room. Suddenly, everything clicked. The photographs, the notebook, the secret room. Whoever was watching me might not have been entering through the house. They could have been using the tunnel. The police organized another search. This time, they brought specialized equipment. Ground-penetrating radar, thermal cameras, the works. I joined them, partly because I wanted answers, partly because I was terrified. 3 hours into the search, one officer shouted. Everyone rushed over. Behind a section of concrete wall in the hidden room, they found something. A metal hatch, covered by decades of dust. The hatch opened downward, revealing a ladder. And darkness. Lots of darkness. Nobody said a word. The air coming from below felt cold. Unnaturally cold. One officer shined a flashlight down. The beam disappeared into blackness. The detective looked at me. You staying up here? I immediately nodded. No chance. The officers descended first. One by one, their flashlights vanished into the darkness. For several minutes, I heard nothing. Then voices. Then radio chatter. Then silence. The longest silence of my life. Finally, the detective reappeared. His face looked pale. Very pale. What did you find? He stared at me, then said 4 words. Someone was living there. Every hair on my body stood up. Apparently, the tunnel system stretched farther than expected, nearly half a mile, deep underground, and hidden within one section was a small living space. Not old, not abandoned, current. There was a mattress, food containers, bottled water, battery packs, flashlights, fresh supplies. Someone had been staying there recently, very recently. One bottle of water was still cold. Whoever lived there had likely left only hours before the search. The realization hit me like a truck. While I slept above ground, someone had been living underneath me, watching me, studying me. For who knows how long. The police launched a massive search. They searched the tunnels, the woods, nearby roads. Nothing. No suspect. No identification. No explanation. It was as if the person had vanished. Then things got worse. 3 nights later, I received a text message from an unknown number. There was no text, only a photo. The image showed my bedroom window. Taken from outside, my blood froze. I checked the timestamp. The photo had been taken 15 minutes earlier. Someone was back, and they wanted me to know it. I immediately called the police. Officers arrived within minutes. They searched the entire property. Again, nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no evidence, only the photograph. The detective looked genuinely disturbed now. This wasn't random anymore. This was personal. The next day, he recommended something. Leave for a while. I didn't argue. I packed clothes and checked into a hotel almost an hour away. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. That feeling lasted exactly 2 days. On the third morning, I opened my hotel room door. A single photograph lay on the floor, just outside. My heart nearly stopped. The photo showed me entering the hotel the night before, taken from across the parking lot. Whoever was watching me hadn't stayed at the house. They had followed me, and somehow, they always seemed to know exactly where I was. I picked up the photograph with shaking hands. For a long moment, I just stared at it. There I was, walking into the hotel, suitcase in one hand, phone in the other, completely unaware that someone was watching me. Again, I immediately locked the hotel room door and called Detective Harris. 20 minutes later, he arrived with 2 officers. The hotel security footage was reviewed. Every camera, every hallway, every entrance. Nothing. Nobody appeared to leave the photograph outside my room. Nobody suspicious entered my floor. The footage simply showed the photograph appearing between camera blind spots. It made no sense. By now, even the detective looked exhausted. This case had become a nightmare. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no suspect, only photographs. Always photographs. The next week passed slowly. I stayed away from the house while police continued investigating. Then Harris called again. This time, his voice sounded different. Not excited, not worried. Confused. There's something you need to see. When I arrived at the station, several old documents covered his desk. Property records, newspaper articles, death certificates, photographs. He slid one black and white photo toward me. Recognize him? I looked down. An elderly man stared back. Sharp eyes, thin face, gray beard. The previous owner? Harris nodded. His name was Walter Green. He had purchased the property nearly 40 years earlier. According to public records, Walter lived alone. Never married. No children, no relatives. At least, that's what everyone believed. Then Harris showed me another document, a hospital record. Walter Green had a son nobody knew about. The child had disappeared when he was 11 years old. Missing, never found. No body, no answers, nothing. The case eventually went cold. I frowned. What does that have to do with me? The detective leaned back. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out. The missing child's name was Daniel. If he were alive today, he'd be around 50 years old enough to have been living in those tunnels, old enough to have been taking photographs, old enough to have written in the notebook. For the first time, we had a possible suspect. Unfortunately, we still had no proof. Then everything changed. 3 nights later, at exactly 2:13 a.m., one of the motion sensors around my property activated. Police rushed to the scene, and this time, they caught something. Not a face, not a clear image, but something. The camera recorded a figure emerging from the woods, tall, thin, wearing dark clothing. The person moved strangely, almost cautiously, like someone accustomed to remaining unseen. Then the figure disappeared behind the house. A second camera picked him up moments later, standing near my bedroom window, watching, just watching. The footage lasted only 7 seconds. Then the figure vanished into darkness. But it was enough. For the first time, everyone knew I wasn't imagining things. Someone was really there. The police increased patrols. Search teams returned to the woods. Drones scanned the area. Nothing. Whoever he was, he knew the land better than anyone. Then came the discovery that changed everything. A hunter found an old cabin nearly 3 miles into the forest. The structure was hidden beneath thick trees, nearly impossible to see from the air. Police investigated. Inside, they found food, clothing, maps, photographs, thousands of photographs. Most were of my property, but not all. Some showed neighboring homes. Others showed roads, vehicles, people, entire years of surveillance. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings, property records, old family photos, and in the center of it all was a picture of Walter Green, the previous owner, pinned to the wall. Like an obsession, like a shrine, the cabin belonged to someone who clearly knew Walter. Then officers discovered something even stranger, a journal. Not the notebook from the hidden room, a different journal, much newer. The final entries finally revealed the truth. The writer claimed to be Daniel Green, Walter's missing son. According to the journal, he had never disappeared. Not really. His father had hidden him. For years. The details were disturbing. Daniel described Walter as paranoid. Convinced that people were watching him, convinced that society was dangerous, convinced that isolation was the only safety. So Walter raised Daniel in secrecy, away from schools, away from doctors, away from people. The tunnels, the cabin, the hidden rooms. That had been Daniel's entire world for decades. When Walter died, Daniel remained alone, watching, observing, unable to connect with normal society, unable to let go of the only home he'd ever known. According to the journal, he became obsessed with the new owner, me. Not because he hated me, because he was fascinated by me. I represented a life he'd never experienced. Friends, work, technology, freedom. He watched me the way someone watches a television show, day after day, year after year. The final journal entry was written only days before the cabin was discovered. I'll never forget it. It read, "He seems happy here. I think the house likes him. Father would have hated him, but I don't. I just wish he could see me." The police launched another search. This time, they believed they were close, but they were too late. Daniel was gone. The cabin had been abandoned. No new tracks, no clues, nothing. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. The case remained open, but nobody found Daniel Green. Eventually, life moved forward. I sold the house, moved to another state, started over. The photographs stopped, the calls stopped, the fear slowly faded.